Sister said she was running away from the abuser. We took her in because we believed her. But in 2 months, our home turned into a bar and she became a threat. I'm Jenna, 34, and I live with my husband Alex, who's 35, in a quiet, tree-lined town in Oregon where the seasons still feel real and the days move at a pace you can actually breathe through. Our life is what most people would probably call ordinary: stable jobs, a comfortable home with creaky floors and a garden we've slowly coaxed into blooming, and a rhythm between us that took years to build but feels unshakably solid. We've been together for over 8 years, and while we've had our share of challenges like anyone else, there's always been this unspoken understanding between us, a safety I never had to question. But that sense of peace, that quiet foundation we worked so hard to protect, was nearly torn apart by someone I never expected. His sister Kayla. She came to stay with us for what was supposed to be a short 2-month visit, just until she got back on her feet. Instead, she left behind a fracture I'm still not sure we've fully recovered from. Kayla, 29, is Alex's younger sister, and while there's technically a bond between them by blood, emotionally they've never been close. Their personalities have always clashed in that quiet oil and water kind of way, Alex being steady, responsible, measured in his decisions, while Kayla has always been a magnet for chaos. Her life has been a revolving door of broken relationships, impulsive job changes, and a steady stream of drama that seems to follow her no matter where she goes. She's the kind of person who burns bridges and then blames the smoke on someone else, always the victim in her own story. Over the years, I'd heard enough about her from Alex to understand that he loved her in that tired, obligatory way that siblings sometimes do when there's nothing left but shared childhood memories and guilt. So when she called and asked to stay with us for a couple of months, saying she needed a break, a reset, just some time, he agreed. Hesitantly but still, he said yes. And because he said yes, I did too. One night, out of the blue, Kayla called Alex, her voice shaking through sobs that barely made sense at first, and between the gasps for air and the choked pauses, she told him that she had run away from her husband. She said he was abusive, that she couldn't take it anymore, that she had left with nothing but her bag and fear, and that she had nowhere else to go. Her words tumbled out like they were on fire, raw and urgent, and even though Alex and I had both learned to take Kayla's stories with caution, something in her voice that night felt too broken to ignore. He hesitated, I could see it in his face, in the way he rubbed the back of his neck and stared at the floor like the weight of her past was pressing on his present. But in the end he agreed. Because no matter how distant they'd become, she was still his sister. And if what she said was true, turning her away wasn't something either of us could live with. We took her in without question, opened our door and did our best to make space not just in the house but in our lives. When she arrived, she looked like a shell of herself, exhausted, jumpy, her eyes shadowed with something that looked like fear or maybe just complete emotional burnout. She carried only one suitcase, half-zipped and barely full, and the moment she stepped inside, she clung to Alex like she was trying to hold herself together. During the first week she barely spoke. She spent most of her time curled up on the guest room bed, sleeping through meals, emerging only occasionally with a faint smile and a whispered thank you. We didn't push. We cooked warm meals, made sure she had what she needed, and offered support without asking for explanations. It felt like the right thing to do, to offer calm after what sounded like so much turbulence. We told ourselves she just needed time, that the silence and retreat were part of healing. We had no idea what was actually beginning to unravel. But within 2 weeks, the quiet began to change, slowly at first, and then with a weight that started seeping into everything. Kayla began bringing home bottles of wine, slipping them into the fridge or setting them out like it was normal, like it was something casual, even celebratory. Every night, she would sit alone in the living room long after we had gone to bed, the faint sound of the TV blending with the clink of glass, and in the morning, I'd find half-finished bottles and sticky wine glasses left on the coffee table, little purple rings soaking into the wood. Then came the requests, first small, almost innocent. She needed a little cash just for travel, then it was for cosmetics because she wanted to feel presentable again, and eventually it was to print a resume, though I never saw her open a laptop. At first, we gave it to her, not wanting to make things harder than they already were, but it didn't take long before the pattern became obvious. It wasn't about rebuilding, it was about leaning, taking, sliding back into old habits disguised as need. Her behavior started to spiral in ways that were impossible to ignore, crossing a line between wounded guest and reckless intruder. She began staying out late, not just once or twice but nearly every night, slipping out without a word and stumbling back in hours later, clearly drunk, her voice loud and slurred as she tried to pretend nothing was wrong. The nights stretched longer, the air in the house turning heavier with each passing day, and then it happened, the moment that made everything undeniable. One night, around 3 in the morning, I woke up to strange voices echoing from the living room, low and unfamiliar. I got up, still groggy, and found her sitting on the couch with an unknown man, both of them half drunk, laughing like they were in a bar, not in someone else's home. The man didn't look surprised to see me, just annoyed like I was the one out of place. "And Kayla?" She barely reacted, just smiled lazily and said, "This is Mark," as if that explained anything. In that moment, something in me cracked because whatever this was, it wasn't about healing anymore. It was chaos, uninvited and unchecked, right in the center of our home. We sat her down the next day, calmly but firmly, and told her that bringing strangers into our home without our knowledge or consent was not acceptable under any circumstance. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a boundary, a basic one, and one we had every right to expect in our own house. But instead of understanding or even pretending to care, Kayla exploded. She turned to Alex first, accusing him of being a control freak, saying he always tried to micromanage everyone's life, and that this was just another example of him not letting her breathe. Her voice rose, sharp and defensive, full of words that had nothing to do with the issue at hand and everything to do with years of resentment she had clearly never dealt with. After that argument, something shifted entirely. She began avoiding us, barely speaking when we crossed paths, acting like a guest in a hotel she resented having to stay in. But what was worse was how she started disappearing again, leaving the house every night, sometimes before sunset, and not returning until the early hours of the morning. When we asked where she had been, she would lie so casually, almost mockingly, offering vague excuses that changed every time. It was clear she wasn't just hiding something, she was daring us to call her out. I started picking up on the inconsistencies in her story about her so-called cruel husband. Little cracks that had once seemed like forgetfulness or trauma now began to sound more like fabrication. One day she'd say he hit her during an argument in the kitchen, and the next she would claim it happened in a car. She'd mentioned staying in a motel after she left him, only to later say she came straight to us. The timeline kept shifting, the names changed, and what used to pass as painful details started to unravel into contradictions. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, too rehearsed at times, too vague at others, as if she was testing which version of the story she had told us last. A knot of suspicion began to tighten in my chest, and I realized that I couldn't just sit with these questions any longer. If we were going to keep sharing our home, our space, and our lives with someone, I needed to know the truth. So I made a decision. Quietly, cautiously, I started looking into her past, reaching out to mutual acquaintances, tracing what I could through social media, determined to find out what really happened before she showed up at our door. I found David's Facebook page after a bit of quiet searching, and with my heart pounding and hands slightly shaking, I sent him a message. I didn't expect him to reply, not quickly at least, but within an hour he wrote back, polite but cautious, and said he was willing to talk. We arranged a call, and I'll never forget the heavy silence that followed after I asked him, gently, if what Kayla had told us was true. He sighed like he'd been holding something in for a long time, and then the truth came pouring out. Kayla had lied. It wasn't him who was cruel or abusive, it was her. He told me how the relationship had started out like most do, with charm and promises, but quickly turned into something suffocating and volatile. She was the one who would scream, throw things, manipulate him emotionally until he was too tired to fight back. She would blow through money recklessly and then demand he cover her debts, threatening to ruin him socially if he didn't comply. He had stayed silent, ashamed and confused, until finally he couldn't anymore. He ended things, quietly and without drama, and she had spun the story in reverse to anyone who would listen. As I sat there listening, a sick realization settled over me. She hadn't come to us for safety. She had come to escape accountability. I sat down with Alex that evening, my phone in hand, and showed him the messages from David, every word carefully read, every line undeniable. He was silent for a long time, his face a mixture of disbelief and resignation, and when he finally spoke, it wasn't with anger, but with a kind of tired sadness I hadn't seen in him before. He said he was stunned, yes, but not surprised. Somewhere deep down he had sensed that Kayla's version of the story didn't quite add up, but part of him hadn't wanted to believe it, because no matter how strained their relationship was, she was still his sister. But now, with the truth laid bare, we both knew what needed to happen. Kayla had to leave. Immediately. It wasn't just about boundaries anymore, it was about protecting our home, our peace, and our sense of safety. The only question was how to do it. How to confront someone who thrived on conflict without letting her destroy what we had left. How to draw a line so firm she couldn't twist her way around it. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but the decision was made. There was no turning back. The night before we planned to confront her, everything detonated on its own. Around 2 in the morning, we were jolted awake by the sound of glass shattering and someone screaming, the kind of noise that drags you out of sleep with your heart already pounding. We rushed out of the bedroom and what we found in the living room was chaos. Kayla standing in the middle of it all, red-faced and yelling at a man we had never seen before. He looked disoriented, trying to calm her down while shielding his face, which had long, angry scratches across one cheek. The lamp beside the couch was shattered on the floor, the end table overturned, a wine glass broken near the corner like it had been thrown. The whole room looked like it had been hit by a small storm. Kayla didn't even notice us at first, she was too busy shrieking at him, something about lies and disrespect, her words slurred and vicious. When she finally turned and saw us, there wasn't a flicker of shame in her eyes. Just defiance, as if we had walked in on her private business and she had every right to bring strangers into our home and let it all fall apart. That was the moment everything inside me hardened. We weren't going to have a conversation. We were going to tell her to leave. We didn't even hesitate, we called the police. The noise, the violence, the unknown man in our house in the middle of the night, all of it had crossed too many lines, and it was no longer just a matter of family drama. When the officers arrived, they took one look at the overturned furniture, the broken glass, and the man's scratched, bleeding face, and immediately began documenting everything. The man, clearly shaken and embarrassed, gave his statement and expressed that he wanted to file a formal complaint against her. Kayla was agitated, pacing, slurring her words, trying to spin her story in real time. She wasn't arrested that night, but the police told us a case would be opened, that there would be a report, and that this wouldn't just go away quietly. When the officers left and she realized we hadn't defended her, hadn't shielded her like she expected, she turned on us with venom in her voice, accusing us of treason, betrayal, abandonment. She screamed that we had always been against her, that we had no loyalty, no family loyalty. And that's when we told her the truth, calmly and clearly, with nothing left to hide. We told her we had spoken to David. We knew he wasn't the abuser. We knew what she had done. There was no more pretending, no more spinning. She was finally exposed, and this time there was no one left to protect her. Kayla erupted the moment the words left our mouths, her fury uncontained, sobbing 1 second and shrieking the next, unleashing every accusation she could think of as if she could guilt us into undoing the inevitable. She called us heartless, traitors, manipulators, screamed that we had turned our backs on family, on someone who was just trying to survive. But we didn't waver, not this time. Alex's voice was steady, his eyes hard with exhaustion and finality, and I backed him without a single word of apology. We told her plainly and without room for negotiation, "You have to pack your things. Right now." There was no more sympathy left, no more space for chaos. She stormed around the house in hysterics, throwing her clothes into bags, slamming drawers and doors, muttering to herself and sobbing in fits as she shoved her belongings together in a frenzy. And just before she left, standing in the doorway with her suitcase half-zipped and her hair a mess, she turned and threw her last grenade, "You'll be sorry." Like a curse, like a promise. But we said nothing. We just closed the door behind her, and for the first time in weeks, our house exhaled. The very next morning, before we even had coffee, we changed the locks. It wasn't just about safety, it was about reclaiming our home, sealing off the chaos that had crept into every corner of our lives. Alex called a locksmith while I gathered the last few things she had left behind, and as soon as the new keys clicked into place, there was a silence in the house that felt like healing. That afternoon, Alex made the call to his parents, something he had been dreading but knew he had to do. He told them everything, calmly, without bitterness, just the truth laid bare. The lies, the violence, the police, and the final confrontation. At first they didn't believe him. His mother cried, his father asked questions in a tone that already carried doubt, and for a moment I could see the pain in Alex's face, not because they didn't take his side, but because somewhere in him, he had hoped they would. But despite their disbelief, they never offered to take Kayla back in. Not once did they say, "She can come here." And that silence, that quiet absence of support, spoke volumes about how deep down, even they must have known who she really was. 2 weeks have passed, and the house has slowly settled back into the quiet we used to take for granted, the kind of silence that feels warm instead of tense, where every corner no longer holds the memory of a slammed door or raised voice. But even as the calm returns, there's a heaviness we're still carrying, something like disbelief, something like betrayal, because we still can't quite wrap our heads around how easily we were used. We opened our home, our time, our trust, and she took all of it like it was owed to her, twisting it until we were left questioning our own instincts. And what hurts the most is the gravity of the lie she chose to tell. Accusations of abuse are not something to play with. They are real and dangerous and leave marks that can't always be seen. Watching someone weaponize that pain for manipulation is something we'll never forget. Now, even though the chaos is gone, there's this residue that lingers: cautiousness, doubt, that small voice asking if we'll ever be able to fully trust again. Because trust, we've learned, doesn't shatter with a bang. It cracks slowly, and rebuilding it is a quiet, painstaking process that takes more time than we ever imagined.